Hello there, and welcome into the BoobergLawcast. My name is Jay McFarland. I'm so glad you decided to join us today because I promise you, when it's all said and done, you're going to know exactly what to do if you're ever in a car crash. Now, of course, we don't want you to be in a car crash, but we want you to be as prepared as possible when and if that happens. And by the time we're done today, Chris is going to give you some very actionable information to help protect yourself and to help recoup any expenses that you have and to aid the healing process. So as always, let's bring in our attorney, Chris Booberg. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for helping me out with this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to do it. And I'm so excited about this topic today. I really feel that people go into, we don't prepare for a car accident, really. And so I'm excited to talk about this. But before we dive into that, tell everybody why law, why an attorney, and why personal injury? What drove you in this direction?
Well, I think I'm a lawyer because my grandfather was a lawyer, and I always looked up to him and respected him. He was the head of personnel for the RF&P Railroad here in Richmond for many years, and he was following the line of his father, who had worked as a laborer on the railroad. He was the first person in his family to go to college, and obviously the first person to go to law school too. I was always very proud of him. And I also wanted to do public service because of my mother and my father. My mother's a teacher, and my father worked for a nonprofit health agency. So they always taught me that it's good to help people out with the talents that you're given. And so when I decided to go to law school, which was basically because my mom reminded me when I was in college that I had said I always wanted to go to law school, and she arranged the interview. So thanks, of course, to my mom. For, everything comes from your mom.
Yeah.
I started out doing criminal defense because I wanted to take on big institutions. I wanted to represent individuals. I didn't want to represent corporations. I didn't want to represent insurance companies. I wanted to represent people so that I could affect their life one-on-one. But I got away from criminal defense because it's just so emotionally difficult. And a friend of mine had an opening at a workers' compensation firm here in town. And I went there and I really liked it because I could still represent individuals. I could help them out when they've been injured. And then I branched off and added in personal injury, which is mostly car accidents and slip and fall type cases, and also social security disability. And in all of those cases, I'm representing an individual who needs help in battling and navigating their way through a system.
Well, it's interesting. It really sounds to me like you're a true believer. This wasn't a decision that you made because you felt like personal injury was a great way to make a ton of money.
There are easier ways if you're a lawyer. There's definitely places where you could go, and every time you work for an hour, you could bill $350, $400, $500. But the nice thing about doing personal injury is you don't have to take money out of anybody's pocket in order to represent them because all the cases are on a contingency. So I'm putting in work based on my belief in myself and my belief in the case that we will be able to win or we will be able to achieve a settlement. And I like it that way. I like to get paid by insurance companies instead of by individuals.
That is interesting. I think that, like I said, it does sound like you are a true believer, but you've also structured your practice in such a way that you can really provide that one-on-one service and people not get engulfed by this massive law firm or corporation.
That's a very good point. I worked for a larger personal injury firm here in town, and I got a lot of great training there. I had a lot of good experience and worked with a lot of good people. But the problem was there were layers there. There were investigators, there were paralegals, and often you talk to them before you even talk to me. And when you call Booberg Law, I got a text from a person today who saw my number online, and we texted and I signed him up as a new client. He's not having to go through my assistant. He's not having to go through an investigator or anybody else. You send a text and I respond, the guy who's going to handle your case. And it's also, I think it helps me become closer to the case. I'm working with the client from the very beginning. So I know the facts of the case. I know what's happened in the case because we have been working closely one-on-one, not through another party.
Now, I also know, just having gotten to know you, that you also had an incident in your youth with a personal injury that has affected your lifetime. And I'm sure that informs your perspective and how you fight for your clients.
Well, it definitely left me not having a lot of faith in insurance companies
Mm,
and in auto accidents in general. When I was 16, I was riding a bike with a friend of mine, and I was hit by a car, and it
mm.
broke my leg and all the way through both bones of my lower leg, threw me into the windshield. Fortunately, I was wearing a helmet because the helmet hit on top of the car and was broken, and I think either saved my life or saved my brain or both.
Wow.
And unfortunately, while I was lying there waiting for my leg to be set, the police officer, the trooper who was in charge of investigating the case, came in and told me what he thought had happened and said, "Don't you agree with that?" And I'm in
Mm.
pain. I'm a young kid, and I'm kind of taught to, police officers are on your side. And so, of course, I say, "Yeah, I guess that's what happened. I'm in a lot of pain here. I don't know what's going on." And then later, I talked to my friend. He said, "That's not what happened at all." But unfortunately, because I had given that statement and because the police officer prepared his report the way he did, I didn't have any claim. And so I'm left with a permanent injury that's a reminder every other step of what it's like to be hurt, what it's like to be hurt when it's somebody else's fault, and what it's like to have a permanent injury. And so I think I can relate sometimes a little better maybe than somebody else can to somebody who's going through this because I've been through it and it affects me every day.
Well, and I think that also speaks to your desire to do these types of broadcasts where you're giving away free information to help prepare people because you were not prepared. And if somebody had just given you some simple advice, very different time back then. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have this ability, but it could have changed the entire outcome if you would have known just a few key things.
That's exactly right. I feel like the reason that I'm doing these videos and that I'm doing videos on YouTube and on Instagram is I'm trying to hit on key issues that people need to know not to mess up their case. And I would much rather a person be informed and that I be a resource for them, even if they don't hire me. I want to have those videos out there so that they can deal with the insurance company. If they choose not to talk to an attorney or they feel like they don't want to have an attorney, at least they can have some insight into the process and they can know these are things you've got to do and these are things that you shouldn't do. And by the same token, I've prepared a couple of sheets that I send out to people, e-documents that have my top tips for workers' comp, for social security disability, for personal injury, for car accidents. And I've got them in English and in Spanish. So if somebody emails me, I send that to them right away. They don't have to sign up with me, nothing like that. I just want to get the information out there so that people can be taken care of and people don't end up in the hands of the insurance company with a potential negative outcome.
Well, and we're going to talk about this as we talk about what to do in a car accident. Some of the first steps that you make, some of the first key steps could define the entire outcome of your case. And so let's dive into that. Let's talk about somebody was just in a car accident. What are the first steps that they should take to ensure that if they are going to file a claim or if they're going to fight the insurance company, that they're in the best possible situation?
The first thing you've got to do is call the police. And I know some people don't want to. You don't want to get involved with the police. It's going to take a longer time. Maybe it doesn't even seem like that big a deal. But one of the most important things we send to the insurance company when we have a claim is the police report. And so they insist on a copy of it. They're not going to pay out a claim without the police report because the police officer will investigate. He may give a ticket to the other party, which is a big deal. But they prepare a little chart, a little diagram of how the accident happened, where the various cars were. They take statements from both drivers, and they take statements from any witnesses that were there. So even if you have a tendency not to want to involve the police in your life, and even if the other guy seems like the nicest person on earth and says, look, I'll just pay this out of pocket, we don't have to involve the police, you've got to. You've got to get a police report prepared. You've got to have the police investigate it. The other thing is we all have cameras on us all the time now. Take photographs of the scene. I had a case involving a client, and the accident happened when she was moving into a lane, a turn lane around another person. And the other person said, no, that's not how it happened. And the police officers arrived on the scene. My client was smart enough to call the police, and they took some photographs, but they didn't take photographs of precisely where the cars were when you were looking at the street. Fortunately, my client took the time to take pictures not only of the top of the cars, where they were, how they had come to rest together, but she had some street view photos. And when we showed those to the judge, I really think that helped us win the day, because she was able to see that my client was where she was supposed to be based on the lines on the street, and that the other person wasn't.
So those pictures made all the difference then.
They absolutely did. I'm convinced they won the day for us. We probably could have won without them, but once the judge saw those, you could see the demeanor of the judge change, and the judge realized that she was going to rule in our favor. At least that's how I felt, and that I could see the impact in the body language of the judge once she saw those photos.
Well, fortunately, we live in a time when we're all carrying cameras around. I remember a time when people would advise you, keep a camera in the glove box in case you're in an accident. Now you have a camera, so why not take the extra little bit of time to document the scene?
That's exactly right. And like my client, you need to do it before the cars are moved. Sometimes if you're in a busy area, the rule is that you're supposed to not block up traffic, but you need to document where the cars came to rest, because we're going to have to kind of back up from there to figure out what was going on before, to figure out who's at fault. So it's very important, before you move the cars, make sure you get a photo of where they are in the street from all angles. You can't ever take too many pictures.
Well, so call the police, then start taking pictures. So then
That's exactly right.
So then what happens, Chris, if you're injured, you're carried away to the hospital? Then do you lose that documentation? Is there a way around that?
You mean if
you're in a car accident and you're taken to the hospital, so you don't have time to take pictures and document the scene?
I see what you're saying. Unfortunately, sometimes that is lost, and people who are seriously injured and critically injured and go away in a helicopter or an ambulance, sometimes they don't have that opportunity. But sometimes they have a friend with them. Sometimes they have a witness who they will give a card to and say, please take some photographs and please document this for me. So I've had that happen in cases. But obviously, if you're incapacitated, you just have to make do as best you can.
You can't do that. So then I guess my next question is, I'm in the accident, I've documented it, I've called the police, and now I'm questioning, I don't really feel any pain, or I just have a little sore neck or something. Do I really need to go to the doctor? I feel fine. So do you recommend going to the doctor every time, or how does that work?
Well, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. The vast majority of my clients are not doctors. So you don't know exactly how you are. I was hit in a low-speed accident one time on a local road here called Broad Street, just rear-ended by a lady. But it was enough that it knocked my telephone out of my hand when I was talking on it. And I went to the office, and I felt like I was a little out of it. And the other guys at the office fussed at me. They said, what are you doing? First off, you shouldn't be working. There's something going on with you. And you should be smart enough to know that you need to get a medical record. You need to have a contemporaneous evaluation, because by doing that, you're taking away one of the many weapons that the insurance company uses. They love to argue a delay in treatment. Let's say that you get in an accident, you're kind of a tough guy or a tough girl, and you say, look, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. This probably wasn't even that bad. First off, you're probably going to still really start hurting the next day. It's my experience that clients say the next day, when the adrenaline has worn off,
right,
and your body has slept and then it's tightened back up again, that's when it really starts hurting. So don't make that decision the first day. Wait until the next day. But if you tough it out for a week or 10 days, and then finally you're like, oh, my shoulder is killing me, I've got to go to the doctor, the insurance company's going to argue, we don't know what happened in those 7 days. We don't know what happened in those 10 days. We don't know if something else happened to him. So what I would say is go to your general practitioner, go to patient first, go to the emergency room if you have to, and tell them every single thing that's bothering you from the top of your head to your bottom of your feet, so there's a record of it. Because something may come up that's related to the accident involving a knee or a shoulder or a wrist or an ankle that really wasn't that bad at the time. But if you have a mention of it early in the medical history, then when it comes up 3 months later, we can always point back and say, she did complain about her ankle being sore after the accident. And then it takes away that argument that, well, you didn't report it, or you delayed in treatment. And when you delay in treatment, the next argument they say is it couldn't have been that bad, or else they would have gone to medical care.
Yeah, so you're kind of projecting forward. What are their arguments and claims going to be, and you're preempting those along the way. This is why I love the advice, Chris, because I guarantee you, I've never thought in these terms, and I know so many other people out there are not thinking in these terms. And by delaying just a little bit, because we all want to tough it out and be tough, and I don't need a doctor, but you really could be damaging any future claims that you have. So I love that. So now I've called the insurance company and I'm working with them on my claim. When do I make the choice? Like, you know what? I think I'm going to bring an attorney in here, because that's another thing. We don't want to be litigious. We don't want to, I'm not a lawsuit guy. So, is when do I say I need Chris on my side?
I've heard I'm not a lawsuit guy or gal a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say to people who say that to me is, car insurance is one of the few products that the law requires you to have. Think about that. You don't have a choice but to have car insurance or to pay into a risk pool if you want to drive. Right. And then at the same time, they've convinced us not to use that product. They've convinced us that our rates will go up. They've convinced us that we shouldn't make a claim. You call in and they try to convince you not to make a claim. That's not the right thing to do. If you pay for insurance and the other party has paid for insurance, then use the insurance. There's no reason, unless you think insurance companies don't have enough money and you want to enrich them, that's fine. But we had a lady who works closely with me, and she got in a car accident and she wasn't going to bring the case. And we were actually just talking about it today, and she ended up getting $12,000 for her case. And she got the medical care that she needed, and she got the compensation that she needed. And it helped her buy a new car, and it helped her recover from the accident. Some friends of mine, I talked to them, and they didn't want to bring their case. And I said, look, I won't even take a fee on this case. I just don't want you to enrich the insurance company. And they ended up doing it. We got them about $13,000. And that's money that's literally just left on the table. But to go back to your other point, you're saying you're working with the insurance company. I think that was your exact wording.
Yes.
So that means you're talking to an adjuster and you're listening to them. And what you're really doing is you're getting advice from the adjuster. You're getting advice from the other team. If you were playing a game, you wouldn't get advice from the other team's coach. You wouldn't want to do what he's telling you. And the next thing that's going to happen, and I have a saying about this, I tell every single one of my clients, no recorded statements. They're going to ask you for a recorded statement. They're going to say, in order to pay this claim, we've got to get you on record. We've got to know what your version of the facts is. We've got to know what you say about it. And the problem is, you haven't seen the police report. You haven't investigated the case. You don't know what's going on. You may be on medication at the time. You may be hurt. And they're trained to ask you leading questions. So they're going to say, just like the police officer said to me, here's what we think happened. Isn't that what happened? And they're going to lead you down the path towards what they want. And the problem then becomes, if you come to me afterwards, the first thing I ask the adjuster for is the recorded statement. And I always breathe a sigh of relief when I know they don't have one, when they tell me we didn't get one. But when they do get one, it can be a problem. I've had a couple of cases, I've had at least 2 cases I can remember of where we lost the case. We just didn't have a claim because of the recorded statement, and they were real claims. In some other cases, we've had recorded statements and we've had to work around it, and we've been able to do it successfully, but there's nothing that's good that's ever going to come from a recorded statement in my experience. I've yet to hear the adjuster who called me back and said, wow, you gave me a recorded statement through your client, and we are going to pay this claim. And I'll tell you another thing, how I know that they don't believe in the power of recorded statements. Because now when the adjuster asks me to have my client give a recorded statement, I say, okay, I tell you what, let's get all of us on the phone. You, me, the other party, the party who was at fault, and my client. I'll take a recorded statement from the party who's at fault, and then you can take a recorded statement from my client. Nobody's ever taken me up on it.
They don't go for that?
Going to. No, they never have, and they never will.
Because the same reason, they don't want to document what their client
That's exactly
is saying.
Right. They know. Yes. They know it's not good for your case. So if they know it's not good for your case, why are they asking you for it? They're asking you for it because they're not on your side, and you shouldn't be working with them. You use the phrase, People think they're working with the insurance company. You're not. You're trying to get somebody to pay you money, and they don't want to pay you money. And they don't have a duty to tell you the truth. They don't have the duty to explain the law to you. They don't have any duty to you. They have a duty to their shareholders, and that's it. And their shareholders want them to pay out as little as possible.
Wow, just such good information. I'm just sitting here thinking, though, if I'm going through this process, I've got the insurance company. They seem so nice and friendly on the phone, and they're telling me they're going to write me a check for this amount, or they're going to pay my bills, or give me a rental car, or whatever. And I'm thinking, on the other hand, or I could go to an attorney, and that process is going to take years, and there's going to be tons of heartache with that process, and who knows how it's going to turn out. So what is the process? Is there a typical turnaround, and what does the process look like if they're working with you?
Well, the first thing is, you're talking about a specific amount of money that the insurance company has agreed to pay this person. That person's not a lawyer. They've never handled a case. They've never tried a case. They don't know how to value that case. I guarantee you that the insurance company isn't paying you as much as I can get you. I've never had a case where the person ended up losing money because they hired me. And I know that's a concern. The adjusters say to them, don't hire a lawyer. You'll just have to pay them 33% of whatever you recover. And that's going to be a bad deal for you. Just let the two of us work it out. Well, part of the problem is, let's say you're working it out 7 days after the accident. And then in 2 months, you're still hurting. You're still having difficulty. You need to go back to the doctor. Well, you've already worked it out. You've already signed on the dotted line. Your case is over. That's what the form that you get from them says. The case is done. So you don't know how to value your case, and you don't know that you're done with your treatment. You should never settle a case right away, because sometimes things come up a month later, 2 months later. Something that didn't seem like a big deal at the time doesn't become a big deal, but it doesn't go away. That's the key. Let's say that your shoulder's bothering you and it's only a 4 out of 10, and you figure, well, heck, it's going to be fine. It's not a big deal. But it turns out you've got a rotator cuff tear. And they don't diagnose that until 4 months later. And at that point, you don't have any coverage for it because you've already signed away your case. So there's no reason to deal with somebody who is really your adversary, but is pretending not to be your adversary. So I answered, maybe I didn't answer your question, because your question was also, how long does the case take?
If you could speak to that.
The case is not delayed by hiring an attorney. The timetable of the case is set by the person's healing. We don't do anything on the case, basically, until other than help them with the car, make sure they're getting medical care, make sure that we have any questions answered. But you really don't talk to the insurance company about the value of the case until the medical care has finished. I mean, that seems logical, doesn't it?
Yes.
The doctors have a term they call maximum medical improvement. And that means you're as good as we're going to get you with modern medical science. And so at that point, they may say you have a permanent injury. They may give you a measurement of that. And at that point, we get all the medical records, all the medical bills, the police report. We send that to the insurance company, because at that point, you have a better idea of what the case is worth. You know what it's cost medically, how long it took for the case to be healed, the person to be healed, and whether or not the doctor says there's a permanent injury. All of those are important factors in determining what a case is worth. And people don't know that. People don't know to ask their doctor, do I have a permanent injury? Have I reached maximum medical improvement? They just figure, well, this adjuster sounds like a real nice person, and this doesn't seem like that big a deal. And they end up settling it when they shouldn't. And I've gotten those calls. There's nothing sadder than a call when somebody's scheduled for surgery and they say, well, I had a car accident. It was 6 months ago. It was 9 months ago, but I've already settled it. And I'll have them send over the release and take a look at it. But the release says, in a lot of legal jargon over 2 pages, you've got no more case because you took a check.
Wow, that's got to be very frustrating. It makes perfect sense. I think about it. You never make an estimate on a car repair only looking at half the damage of the car, right? You would never do that. So it makes so much sense to say, let's figure out how long this injury is going to last and what your real damages are. And insurance companies are absolutely not going to want to do that. They don't have any incentive to do that.
No, they want to get it done. And to your point, you would never repair your car just by you looking at it. I'm no
That's
expert.
true.
I don't know anything about cars.
Yeah.
I know that these days the plastic bumpers have all sorts of structures underneath them. What looks like it wasn't damaged on the outside of the plastic bumper, the underneath part is set up to absorb the impact. So that can cost $1,000 to repair, and on the outside it looks like it's just a little scrape to the bumper. It's a perfect example of not doing something that you aren't trained to do. I'm not a doctor. I go to a doctor when I need help. I'm not a car appraiser. So when I need a car repair, I go to a mechanic or I go to an appraiser. Just like that, you're not trained in law. You have not dealt with adjusters before. I've dealt with them for over 20 years. I know a lot of the tricks. I know how to set up a case, and it's free to talk to me. Why wouldn't you?
Well, it's interesting. I'm curious. There is a perception out there, I think specifically with personal injury attorneys, that you guys will take any case. You'll file anything. You just you're just in it for the money. Speak to that a little bit, Chris.
So you're talking about the insurance company and the Chamber of Commerce have gotten out there this idea of frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah.
Frivolous lawsuits are clogging up our courts and they're ruining things for insurance companies. And oh my gosh, isn't it awful? Well, think back to what I said earlier. I don't get paid unless I win the case. So why on earth would I take a frivolous case? When I take on a case, I'm paying the experts out of my pocket. I'm paying for the medical records out of my pocket. And I would never do that in a case that I never thought I would win. And we've talked about how hard the insurance companies fight these cases. They're not just going to roll over on a case that they know is frivolous. If I know it's frivolous, they're going to know it's frivolous. They're never going to pay on that case. That's why it's so important that I do my own intake. That's why I talk to people up front and I make a decision after talking to them about whether I'm going to take the case, because I need to believe in the case. I need to know that I think we can have success with the case. And if not, I let the people down easy. But I don't take those cases. It wouldn't do me any good to take a frivolous case. I'd just be wasting money and time. All I have is my time to bet on eventual results because I'm not getting paid anything up front.
Well, and I think it's also a vote of confidence, right? If you're willing to spend money up front, put in your time and effort, that should really tell each one of your clients you really believe in their situation and you're really going to stand by what they're doing.
It absolutely does. That's what I'm telling you. When I say I will take on your case, it's almost like we're getting into a relationship. We're going to be dealing with each other for 6 months, maybe 3 months, sometimes 12 months or 18 months. We're going to be working closely together to prepare for a deposition if we go to trial and we're not able to settle the case. In preparing the settlement, we're going to be working closely together. So when I'm talking to a client, I consider that my job interview. I'm trying to convince them that I'm the right attorney for them. I want to be their attorney. And I can't know that unless we've talked at length about what happened with their case and unless I believe in them. It happens very, very rarely. But when you get a feeling, sometimes people call and they immediately want to know what's this case worth. And they're waiting for you to make them a promise about what the case is worth, what you're going to be able to get them. And my immediate answer is if somebody tells you what your case is worth days after the accident, they're lying to you to get your case. I can't tell you what it's worth because I don't know what your medical treatment is going to be. All I can tell you is I'll do everything I can to help you and make sure that you get the most for your case.
Well, I think that's very powerful. I'm curious, Chris, when it comes to car accidents, are people looking at a trial or do these mostly go to settlement? How does that work?
It's a very interesting point. Statistically, they say 94 to 96% of cases settle. So the vast majority of cases settle. And just because you have to file suit doesn't mean it won't settle. I've had a lot of people when we can't settle the case, I say, look, we're going to have to file suit. They say, oh, gosh, wow, we're going to have to go to trial because they think filing suit means the negotiation ends. It doesn't end. We still continue to negotiate. We have mediations. I still talk to the other lawyer. It just means that with that first person, with that first adjuster, we couldn't get the case settled. I've had cases where a new adjuster looked at the case after I filed suit and called and said, hey, I don't know why this case wasn't settled. I see what they offered you. I think it's worth more. And we've settled the case. So it doesn't mean that it won't settle. And the vast majority of cases do settle.
Well, and it seems to me that just by saying you're willing to go to trial sends a message to the insurance company. Chris isn't messing around, and so maybe we should up our offer in settlement because we don't want to go to trial.
Well, and you're right. They're trying to see if I'm messing around, and they're also trying to see if my client's messing around. Because people aren't trained public speakers. Everybody's nervous about testifying in front of a jury and that they might say the wrong thing and lose their case. Nobody wants to have the hassle. Nobody wants to be deposed. So I think a lot of it is a test of the client's resolve and my resolve. And I say to the client, let's go. Let's do this. Let's file this case. We may not go to trial, but if we do go to trial, we're ready. And that's why my intake process is so important to me. I've worked with other law firms and I've taken over cases from other law firms. When the case didn't settle, they got out of the case. They call themselves trial lawyers, but when the case needed to be tried, they didn't want to try the case. And I've taken it over and tried it. And when I do intake with somebody, that means I'm meeting them for the first time. I'm looking at that case. Is this a case that I'm ready to take to trial? And so when we have to go to trial, it's no surprise, and we're ready for it, and we've been preparing for it the whole time. And if they test us, like you mentioned, if they say we're not going to pay you unless you file, we just go ahead and file.
And then you're off to the races.
That's exactly right. Now, we're still talking settlement. Doesn't mean it won't settle, but it means we passed that first test. We're a law firm that's willing to file the lawsuit. We're willing to go the distance, and sometimes that sends a strong message.
Well, I love that. So anything else as we're talking about what to do if you're in a car accident? Any other advice you'd like to pass on?
I'm going to repeat my mantra, and that's all I'm going to say to make sure everybody hears it. Don't give a recorded statement. Never give a recorded statement. They want to take a recorded statement because it's in their favor. It's not good for you. Please, please don't give a recorded statement. And please subscribe because Jay and I are going to be working on these. There's going to be more podcasts that are shorter, little pieces of advice, maybe 2 or 5 minutes on specific issues. And then we're also going to have larger interview formats like this. And just thank you so much, Jay, for working with me. I'm new to this, and it's made it a lot better to work with you.
Well, I'm fascinated by it. I just learned so much because look, I've never been in, and I've been lucky. I've not been in a car accident before, but I now know, call the police, take pictures, go to the doctor, and then call Chris. I mean, it all adds up for me. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a doctor. I shouldn't pretend like I know these things. And don't give a recorded statement. See, I'm a quick study. I feel like I'm adequately prepared now. And if I'm ever in a car accident, I'm going to be able to know how to protect myself and my own interests. There's real power in that, Chris.
That's what I want. That's most important to me. I want people to know what to do.
Yeah, there's real power in that. So I love that. So, and I would also say contact Chris if you have a topic that you'd like him to explore in one of these podcasts. We'd be glad to cover some of those issues for you as well. For now, thank you so much for joining us. I really hope that you've gotten some great information about what to do in a car accident. Join us next time on the BoobergLawcast. It's been a real pleasure, Chris, and I will catch you next time.
Thank you.